We're up to episode 11, where I talk with Sharon Martin about professional development, what it looks like, what it smells like, what it tastes like. Okay, maybe not in that kind of detail, but that's how we are spending this day in the year of APing Dangerously.
Welcome to the Year of APing Dangerously podcast. Here's your host, Kathy Walker.
This was very exciting for me because I keep asking people, oh, can you be on my podcast? And then they were like, well, what do I talk about? Well, recently we had a really exciting professional development where it was actually teachers teaching teachers, as well as some other folks kind of coming in the district and focusing on different areas, whether it was wellness for students, for staff and teachers, or whether it was things going on in classrooms and like testing. And actually I was invited to do a session on podcasting. So there was a lot of different things and a lot of different pieces going on. And it just got me thinking that as building leaders, as assistant principals and aspiring principals, we're the ones kind of working with PD for our buildings. Sometimes you have a whole district kind of mapping out what that looks like. Sometimes it's just up to you, and also knowing what your staff needs. But I got to talk to one of my friends and mentors, Sharon Martin, and we sat down because she, for our district, is one of the curriculum coordinators, especially on the secondary side. So just talking about what went into our recent PD, and hopefully there's something that could help you out. We do throw around a lot of terms. We had a good long conversation. So my 30 minutes that I promised you guys I'd stick to, I'm going to tell you now up front, it goes over. So again, if you're watching this or listen to me. For some reason, I think I'm on TV, and goodness knows I'm not, and that's a good thing. If you are listening, it is a little longer than 30 minutes this time around, but I guarantee they are chock full of good things. And just so you don't miss anything, please check out the show notes, because we talk about a lot of different things, and I do want references in there so that you can hit them and follow up on some of the things we talk about, as well as some of those acronyms we toss around. I think I put a few definitions in this week's show notes so that you know exactly what we're talking about. But without further ado, we want to welcome to the show Sharon Martin. I will let you introduce yourself and a little bit about your role.
My name is Sharon Martin, and I work in the district. Currently, my role is Director of Secondary Curriculum Support, but I like to refer to myself as the help. So,
yay, the help! Not
one of the best books ever. But in our
not in the chocolate pie kind of way,
no,
but the good kind of help. No, just kidding.
I'm
sorry, I sprung that on you, but when you said that, I'm like, oh, that's a good.
That's
I
right.
can use my little sound effects.
You go right ahead. But so my background is I was a high school English teacher and coach, like a cheerleading coach for 13 years. And I also
God
taught,
bless.
Right? You haven't truly lived unless you've coached high school sports. And so then I've also taught yearbook, reading competency, ESL, French. This was early on in my career when you just need a job. And so through all those contexts, I think I've developed a perspective that's maybe a little different than just a straight, I've always taught English. You know, so.
That's excellent, because for our audience, which is assistant principals and even teachers aspiring to be assistant principals, always looking for different perspectives. Mm-hmm. And again, everybody comes through their role through just some different ways. I initially asked you to kind of come on and talk about professional development, because one of the episodes I'm working on is writing my PDP, which I wrote an excellent PDP, and then the system went down, and then when I went back in, I couldn't find it, and I don't think I saved it right or something.
Right.
Who knows what?
It's been hiccuping all
right.
Long.
But again, I am planning to do a lesson on PDPs and writing them, but with professional development and the session that we just had, where the teachers had choice, and we had a lot of different things going on, and a lot of yoga for teacher, everything from, I don't know if you could talk about it a little bit and how that came to be, because who knows, maybe one of our assistant principals listening will think about that in terms of what they could do with their staff.
So one of the things I think that has been really compelling for me whenever we think about how to design professional development. We've gone through a lot of transition in the last 10 years that I've been in a role of more teacher support. And so in the beginning, we were trained as instructional facilitators was the role. There was one per school. We got the district content. It was trained to us. We were given the PowerPoint, and then we had to take it back to our staff and train them the way we had been trained. And creativity or customization was not encouraged. And so, and at that time, it was what we needed. And it was during that time that we earned the Baldrige Award. So I think the first question you have to ask yourself is, where is your organization and what are you trying to accomplish with this professional development? And so if you're trying to, as our friend Calvin Brown used to say, a rising tide lifts all boats. The idea is if you're trying to raise the capacity or increase the capacity of all people in a particular skill or content, then you do need to do district-wide training where everyone gets the same message, and you can, as much as is possible, guarantee that people have gotten the correct information correctly. So there was a time when that was the kind of professional development that we did. And so it has its time and place. Then we moved to a more, what did the district think would be good for teachers? And it was when we had moved away from that more prescriptive approach. And so if someone in our district, had been trained in, for example, Anita Archer's explicit instruction, there's 16 core components. And let's say that someone decided, writing frames are good for everyone, then the entire district would be trained on writing frames. And I think that's pretty typical for a lot of districts that I've encountered, back in the 2009 through 2013, 14, at least in this area. So here's a great thing. Let's share it across the district. And so it was at that time that we instituted early release professional development days. Mm-hmm. And so, originally, professional development happened for teachers during their planning periods. And so depending on your context, you might have 45 minutes, you might have 30 minutes, you might have an hour, 90 minutes. But the reality is, who wants to give up their planning period to come sit and listen to somebody else? And so early release enabled us originally 6 days a year and now 3 days a year. We release students early. It's always on a Wednesday because we found if we did those on Fridays, the attendance would drop, not only of students, but also of the teachers we were trying to support.
Gotcha. No matter where you are in the country, the beach awaits.
That's right. Exactly. Even if you're landlocked. So we moved to this early release professional development. We are a large county. I don't remember exactly. I think we're like 57 miles long or something. It's in the 50s. And so to get people to central locations, we release kids around 12-ish at the high school, middle school level. And so we start ERPD at around 1, and people are still late. And we just show them grace because it's impossible to get there by 1 from some of our sites. And we go until 4-ish. Sometimes 3:30, sometimes 4, but the idea is that they come, they are with their job-alike peers. So you're with middle school ELA, or you're with all ELA 6 through 12, or all math, that kind of thing. And so that was our next iteration. And here most recently, I think what's shown up for me, we've spent so much time talking about the mental health of our kids, but part of my role is I get to be in buildings all the time. And so I've just seen our teachers wearing the heavy load that they carry a lot more this last year.
And I'm thinking about it, like right now for our district, we started early August and it is late October. But again, you could be listening to this podcast in May or March. I don't know. But there are those times in the year where the energy, it just takes a nosedive. Mm-hmm. Personally, I think it also
coincides.
Right. It also moves with the lunar cycle.
Yes.
And I mean, People
no
don't
lie.
believe me, but I'm telling you, for the kids, for the teachers, but I know there has been a big increase in social emotional learning,
Yes.
and things on the student side, but also too on the adult side, because if we're not taking care of each other, how are we going to take care of anybody's kids, our own kids, the kids in our building? You got to do it. That's why I was so excited about this particular ERP day, because it was T3, teachers teaching teachers kind of thing, but it also included some healthcare professionals. And I was really amazed at some of the people I talked to, the teachers who had a better understanding about things like, ODD, oppositional defiant disorders, and just some of the things that the kids are dealing with. And I know for me, coming from middle school to high school, middle school issues I dealt with, I thought were, whoa, that's some weighty stuff. And then high school, wow. I mean, my population has doubled, and I'm realizing, wow, that's a lot to carry around.
Yes.
And it can take a toll on you.
It does. And I think what's hard, especially for our teachers, is maybe you get lucky, and some of the kids that you get on your roll, some professional tells you this child has ODD, oppositional defiance disorder.
I think it's defiant.
Okay,
disorder.
we'll get that.
We'll look it up.
Yeah, so ODD.
We'll look it up and put it in the show notes.
Yes. So, you get
No, if it's oppositional defiant, it's not. No, it's not. Yeah, you know me. No, you don't know me.
That's right. Well,
I'm
I
down
was
with
throwing
ODD.
back to the 80s with get down with OPP. Sorry, we digress.
Well, we got to be defiant. Yeah, I'm
That's
sorry.
right.
We are.
Okay, we're children of the 80s. Roll with it. So I think, if we're lucky, we get some professional who comes to us before we get this kid in class, and they say to us, this baby is special, and so you're going to need to know these things to be able to meet their needs, and I don't mean special as in like they're in a special class. It's just they may have certain triggers that you need to know so that you don't unintentionally trigger this child. And so I've always appreciated when I had people on staff who helped me know how to not trigger a child. And so I think ultimately what I've seen is that quite often you have people who come to teaching because they have a heart to serve, and they envision what their classroom is going to look like, and then the kids show up, and so that vision and that reality are oftentimes in conflict.
Right.
And so I felt like having the professionals there to say, like, here's what ADHD and ODD look like in the classroom. Here's how to help children who have anxiety or depression, like how to recognize those symptoms in the classroom. Because I think part of it is, particularly the older the kids get, teachers think in terms of misbehavior, right? And so then what was important to me was that so this was the idea of one of the instructional coaches, the content coaches. Can I say her name?
Oh,
Stephanie
sure.
Harris, because she had worked in that alternative setting with our students at the alternative school. Some of them are in really intensive services, and we call that day treatment.
Right.
And so she had, circled back after we had talked as a content coach team about how we might best serve our teachers. And so she touched base with the folks from the Children's Hope Alliance and said, would you be willing to train our teachers about what this looks like, how to recognize those signs in the classroom? Because like I said, most of the time teachers see it as misbehavior. So when a kid puts their head down, the first thought is you're being disrespectful. Instead of on the first level, maybe they work at night. They're helping their family. It may be they can't read and they're trying to keep from getting called out for that. They're trying to save face.
When you say that, I always think of one of the books I read during my program, and that was Lisa Del Pitt's Other People's Children.
Oh, wow.
And just getting an understanding for even cultural differences for those teachers who say, look at me, look me in the eye. And there are some cultures, especially some Asian cultures, where that's a sign of disrespect.
Exactly.
And just understanding some of those cultural nuances. I also thought of the CPI training,
Yes.
and that's a training that we do. And that's the crisis prevention intervention training that we do. And I believe we do it for some of our low incidence room teachers and assistants, as well as some of our administrators all have to have it, APs and principals. But when I think of some of the tactics and some of the things they go over, I'm thinking, wow, in a school where you do have, and I'm going to tie them together,
Right.
high free and reduced lunch, where you
Yeah.
have that whole, you see a lot more of some of those issues, some of those responses to trauma, and that kind of training probably would be helpful,
Yes.
like staff wide,
Yes.
just so that again, kids not going to learn, as Rita Pearson said in our video, they're not going to learn from you if they don't like you.
That's right.
And it's just being able to be in tune to what they're going through, or understand it and understand how to approach them and deal with them. It helps. It helps build that relationship, that relational capacity where, you got to have it. And again, when you're taking on all that, it's a lot. So that's why I was excited to see you guys did yoga for teachers. And again, that particular Wednesday, because the kids left early, we had one class, a class that's getting training in AVID, that actually did yoga here in the classroom. We pushed
After
all the desks.
ERPD?
It was on that day.
Oh, that's so cool.
On that day, we had 2 periods. A local establishment who I'm giving them the plug. They're not a sponsor, but a yoga loft here in Statesville.
Yeah.
Actually came in and for some of our students did some exercises where they brought in the mats and everything, but just showed them some breathing exercises, some poses to relax. And again, it wasn't a full yoga class session, but at least they were explaining different moves to them, different things to do, and giving them some resources to kind of calm their minds.
Definitely.
One of the most fun things I had as a AP when I was at my previous school at the middle school level, I had an empty classroom that I got a couple of mats from PE, a couple of my own yoga mats, and we had what we call was the quiet room.
Yes.
So during our remediation intervention period, if you wanted to, you could come down and we just sat, listened to some music and relaxed and did some breathing. You know, it wasn't, I'm no yoga instructor,
Right.
but I've been to enough classes and enough meditation that I can do some breathing.
That's right. Well, and there's some universally good for all human beings stuff that we need our kids to know how to do.
Yeah.
So
definitely.
that's wonderful. Well, and so I think what happened for us was when we think about trying to get teachers in their professional development I really think of it as we want them to humanize the kids, right? So some people, particularly at secondary, you get folks who have come to this as a lateral entry, or they've, in other words, they've had no educational courses. Maybe they were a banker. Maybe they were, something completely unrelated to education, and they worked for themselves or as an independent kind of person. And suddenly you're responsible for 30 plus kids in one block, potentially 100 plus in a given day. And now you're supposed to understand how human nature works. And you're supposed to understand it in terms of 12-year-olds and 16-year-olds. Right. And, so when we think about, we need the adults to understand the kids, and we need to know them first as human beings and as souls before we try to make them mathematicians. We kind of applied that same approach to our professional learning this past week, that there's this overwhelming sense of just, I guess, overwhelm. Like our teachers are expressing it in lots of ways. You can see it on them physically. And so many of our teachers here in North Carolina, and I don't think our county is unique in this way, but so many of our teachers have second jobs because of the lack of pay, which is a lack of valuing at the state and the national level. So I think, you're responsible for our most valuable treasure, but you don't get paid for that. And so for me, it was about how do we take care of them as human beings, the teachers. And we talk so much about taking care of the kids as human beings, and how to connect them to resources if they have no food, how to connect them to resources if they don't have clothing, if they are in trauma or things like that. But we don't address that our teachers, just because they're grown-ups doesn't mean that they
have it all together.
That's right. And that they're no longer impacted by their own childhood traumas, that they may have never expressed to anyone, but they're carrying that around every day. And so I
I know at one of the trainings for the administrators, we talked about that whole idea, that ACEs score and that number, and even just taking our own in there. And it made me think, wow, the things that even as adults that we're still carrying on and living with. And recently in a Twitter chat, AP chat, that comes on Sunday nights, somebody talked about that and said one of the things that they do when they're dealing with discipline with their high school students, to get down to the why, they've actually started talking to them about things like their right, about what could be triggering their behavior. And I thought, wow, that's interesting, because I know I spend some time talking to kids about how to do school, and that it's different from what we do out in the street, and and drawing those lines. And I think it's harder now for our kids. I'm not trying to blame social media, but I just think it's a different culture where they have been in the habit of just throwing things out there, and it gets thrown out into the world. And I think now in class it gets thrown out of their mouths, and again, not understanding the consequences of things that they might say or do. So, in teaching all of that.
Well, I think social media is about the reaction. So people are posting whatever they're posting because they anticipate a reaction. And I think you're 100% right. And it's not that we've become crotchety old people, that it's the social media, but it's created a different way of thinking about why are you communicating this, And so it's about likes, it's about retweets. It's about, it's about those kinds of things. So I think our kids don't have a lot in their lives that are saying to them, maybe this is a good one to keep to myself. And the same for our teachers, for all adults, because I saw something years ago about like the 4 types of people that are on Facebook. You've got the comedian, the political analyst, the drama queen, and the philosopher, and I started thinking about it. I was like, daggone, that's exactly right. Like, I think of myself as the philosopher. I know. Right? It's like,
in everybody's mind, they're the philosopher. That's right. But in reality, people, you are the drama queen. Yay.
Dun, dun, dun.
Oh, sorry.
Exactly. And so
I played that sound by accident, totally. But
it's pretty good, though. I liked it. But I think, so we've got, at the same time, there's been this bloom in a sense of making people irrelevant, or that cancel culture within social media. And so there's this, in my estimation, what I've seen among our students and, the way adults behave online, that I do think plays into the way we enter our classroom spaces, whether that's as an adult or as a kid. There is this sense of, I'm gonna talk about later on social media. And I mean, you and I have seen evidence of that here in North Carolina, in our own district and another nearby district, of people who have posted things to social media that are harmful and wrong
and hurtful. And it's just like,
they really thought that was okay.
But when you talk about that for the reaction, for the reaction, and again, for our teachers in our classrooms, and sometimes what we were talking about kind of before we even started the podcast, just again, for that reaction, whether it's the adults or for the students. I thought another thing that was interesting that I heard during the professional development out of teachers, it's just talking about really like the idea of choice.
Yes.
And again, for those of you listening who are administrators, that is something to think about. And I know, again, given the choice, a lot of teachers are kind of, I want to shut my door and just do my thing. But I think there is, and I've seen this, especially when I go to conferences, there is this hunger for good quality PD. And when teachers get it, they love it, and they really want something that and I know even from my time in the classroom, maybe you can remember too, I always wanted something I could take back and kind of
use it now.
Use it now. I like that quality of it, and I also wanted something that spoke to me as a learner, that I can enjoy. And I know adult learners are a lot different than kid learners, but still I kind of needed to. I needed to be engaged.
Yes.
And I'm always curious, how do we get those feelings or that energy to kind of translate to what teachers take with them, that, hey, it's not just about, oh, I'm learning this, neat little strategy that I can try, but to realize, and a lot of times if I'm doing a training or if I'm doing something, I'm like, oh, well, hey, we're going to do an activity using this discussion cube, which, by the way, you can use it in your classroom, I kind of make it explicit like that. But how do we get, because the conversation I had with this one teacher, I'm like, what did you like about it? Oh, that you got to choose things. I'm like, well, how do you think your kids would feel if they got a choice like that? And I kind of saw like some gears kind of shifting, like, wait, I can give the kids choice, or at least.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that's driven by, if you're at high school, you got 90 days. You better get it done, and so I think sometimes there's a feeling at the classroom level that, if I give them choices, they won't know how to self-manage. They won't know how to manage their time. But also, if they get choices, what if they don't pick the right things? And then I don't get the material covered, in quotes,
Right.
But I think you're exactly right. And what we do know about adult learners is that they want you to acknowledge and honor, as you think about what you're offering, that they are professionals, they are adults, they do have a context that they bring to the table. And so I think if I've asked teachers before, do you feel like this was like you were a blank slate and we were, writing on you for the first time, so to speak? Or do you feel like this was an opportunity for you to be acknowledged for what you know, and then let's see, like, how can we take this one step further? And, in a lot of contexts, they feel like they're treated as if they know nothing. And no one enjoys that feeling. And so one of the things that we try to do before every professional development is we always have the content coach for the area that serves that group send out some kind of a survey, short, never more than 3 questions, like just really plain, that just basically says,
I hope you're not describing a pre-assessment for adults.
Right.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yes. where we ask them to say, like, what would you love, for this upcoming professional development? And then we always try to give them at least 80%. And the thing is, in that, we've had to make a shift in equipping teachers to be room facilitators or discussion facilitators, and making that distinction between you're just facilitating a discussion versus I'm asking you to make a presentation. I'm asking you to train content. And I think that's
but that also helps that teacher's professional development, I'm sure, if they're looking at their own PDP goals and what they're working on. And also, too, by being able to facilitate that conversation among teachers, maybe hopefully will shift some of the thinking in their head about how they work with their kids in their classroom, that it's not always just about me lecturing and dumping knowledge into the buckets.
Exactly.
But that, again, that you're facilitating and letting, and it always seems like when teachers take those risks and let the kids do that, they can.
Yes.
And they'll show you every single time.
Yes.
Sometimes I think it's the adults kind of trusting them to do it. I know one of the things I, as a building leader and working on my skills, to me, it seems like I'm a better leader if the people under me are able to lead and take responsibility. So I know for our next staff meeting, I have asked one of our lead teachers, I'm like, you know what, when I come into your room, there's so many different things going on that are so cool. Could you lead our next staff meeting like it's your class? Like when you take the brain breaks, get everybody moving, the opening activities to kind of assess where we are.
Exactly.
So, I've asked her to do that because I think it'd be neat for the staff to see that. And again, hopefully they're seeing, no, we're not trying to just elevate one teacher, or we're not trying to put anybody down. We're just showing you a different way to do it.
Yes.
And how could it work for you?
Definitely. And super affirming for that teacher, but it's professional learning. And so you can still give, in our district, CEUs for that, because that's, the big thing that's happening. We say on the spreadsheet, it's called the school umbrella, the CEU umbrella, the continuing ed units. And so they're learning from their peers within their context. And we have found that teachers tend to be willing to learn more and listen more authentically if they feel like the person who's leading them has taught in their context. And by that, I mean, if you have a particularly challenging group of children because of the culture or community that they come from, if someone who's teaching you about something that's worked with the kids has taught in that same kind of context, obviously they're going to listen more. And so with our district being so large, we have every possible kind of demographic dynamic. You know, we have kids who live on the lake in $1 million homes, and we have children who live in government housing and
in children's homes and foster care.
Yes,
so, I mean,
that's exactly right.
We run. I
and
think
farms.
The range.
Yeah. I mean, like every
the farm kids. I mean,
Yeah.
we have, and I think that's part of what our district has done with some of the choice programs, because we offer a little bit of everything from IB programs to early college programs. So we have a lot, a lot of diversity.
Absolutely. And I think what's been important anytime I've been part of anything is I've tried to make sure people understand that although this person may be teaching in a context that's different than yours, if they do end up, because they're inevitably they're going to end up in lots of trainings where they're with people across varying contexts. So that's when I think it's really important that you refer to the data. If you're that room leader or if you're that content trainer, I think it's really important in adult professional learning that you help them see what they have in common so that when they do turn and talk or when they do discuss topics at their tables, that they know, for example, that yes, even though this may be a school that's closer to the lake where the median income is far exceeds that of our teachers or anybody else,
Right.
They still also have, 57% of the kids come in on grade level, which means 43% don't, and I think there's a lot of times misconceptions about what people, what their challenges are in the classroom. And so that to me is another big part for the professional learning of adults is helping them know who they're in the room with and what they have in common, what their common challenges are and common barriers are. Because even if we come from different school settings, if I know that you're teaching struggling readers or you're teaching struggling mathematicians, and they behave the same way and they have the same, core skill deficits or whatever, then we can hear each other more authentically, knowing that we're facing the same barrier. And I think that's important with professional learning.
Okay. So you kind of have to start with the data and what group are you looking at? Where are you looking to go?
Why is this group of people together? And I think, ultimately what kind of started all this for me was that a couple years back at our largest high school, they were really, if we're being honest, at high school, PLC is kind of hard because it's impossible to schedule all the people who teach the same thing at the same time so that they have planning and can PLC.
I think because, again, coming from middle school to high school, I'm seeing that with middle school, that it is kind of like grade level specific and you can kind of plan together a little. And even if you structure it so that it's department level, it's a little easier to kind of move, especially you're only dealing with 2 or 3 grades in a junior or middle school, whereas high school, just between having the core classes, electives, there's so many different things, there's so many moving parts that PLC idea or concept, it's a struggle.
It is. And so at this high school that has 100 plus staff members, I had been asked to come in and, essentially, this was years ago, but make them PLC. And my first thing was, well, they can't. Let's be honest. So I think the first thing is you have to be realistic about what you expect. And so a big piece of sort of guiding wisdom for me is function over form. And so I went to our deputy superintendent over curriculum and instruction, and I asked her for the key components for her, what made something a PLC. So what for her was the operational definition, because people got hung up on it must be 45 minutes or it must be an hour and it must be this and it must be. And so after I talked with her, there were really only a couple musts. And it was that you had conversations about your students based in data. You shared best practices. And, the expectation was that you would do it for somewhere between 30 minutes and an hour, what was available to you. And so then I said.
But again, even when you're talking about that time, it's kind of quality conversation.
Yes.
Because I know a teacher or two. We could spend 30 minutes to an hour. We might be talking about everything but the data.
Right.
and doing all our complaining. But it's, again, quality time.
Right.
Discussing that data, kind of using some guidelines, whether you're using some kind of SWOT or something.
That focuses the conversation. Otherwise it becomes, let's talk about our field trip particulars, or let's complain, or let's talk about our weekend. And I get that because they're human. And so I'm not saying that in the sense to like complain about teachers. That's the reality, And so I think we have to acknowledge that reality exists. So then what are the core components that we're asking the teachers to do? And that's where I kind of felt prompted to go to the deputy superintendent and say, like, what makes a PLC in your estimation? Because she's who we answer to. And then I started looking at, what the leaders in the field were saying. And I think it was Daniel Pink that I found, that he was talking about adult motivation and what really works. And there's a lot of videos of him, but this one in particular where he talks about, for adults to have what they need choice, and they need the autonomy for time, task, technique, and team. And so let me be in charge of when I do this. Let me be in charge of what I do. Let me be in charge of how I do it. And let me be in charge of with whom, if anyone, I do it. And so I took that concept to that high school and just said, like, you've got choice and autonomy in these 4 things. If it's not the right group at high school, because how like in high school you end up with, let's just say you get a band kid that's becoming at risk. Typically your band kids most of them end up with the same couple, 2, 3 teachers in the fall, the same couple, 2, 3 teachers in the spring, just because they're in band. So they kind of,
their schedule.
Yeah. So maybe the right PLC for a kid isn't all the the right PLC for a teacher isn't necessarily the people who teach what they teach. Or maybe it's that they need that group, the people who teach what they teach, once a month or every other week, but they need people who teach similar kids on the alternating weeks. So that was another thing for me was, are we willing to let them meet with different groups and still call it PLC? And she said yes. And so a lot of that, I really appreciated her wisdom on that.
A little Ron Clark, having the right people on the bus.
That's right.
So who needs to be in this PLC
yeah.
to serve the population that we need to serve?
Yeah.
I get it.
And so I think that idea of give me autonomy as an adult learner on time, task, technique, and team has never really left me. And so I'm always thinking of that as I'm working with the content coaches. What can we give people voice and choice in? Sometimes we're able to do it really well. Sometimes it's just not what we're able to do. And based on our district-wide data, this you don't get a choice about. Everybody needs to hear about math anxiety, right? So that was a great call. And so everybody 6 through 12 learned from a local Institute of Higher Ed, a professor speak about math anxiety, what it looks like in the classroom, and things you could do to help kids combat that. Mm-hmm. So it's a balance.
I wish they would have done a separate session just for parents.
Yeah.
Anxiety. Because, as a former math teacher, it was a very real thing that some of the anxiety, I had kids who were excelling at math, but some of what was hindering them were their parents' on anxiety that they had actually had instilled in them already. And I'm thinking, why are you hating math?
Exactly.
Exactly. And then I talked to the parents and I'm like, oh, that's why. Okay,
yes,
I get
exactly.
it. No, but again, it was what those secondary math teachers probably needed to hear, and hearing it from a professional. To me, that seems like just as much value add as, again, hearing from peers who are doing things maybe differently that can teach you something as well. That's what I thought was so key and exciting about.
And I think it's
around the training.
I agree. And I think it's again about knowing your audience, because for us, at least here in North Carolina, we have a very hard time finding math teachers. And so what we have found in our district is that, we have a lot of lateral hires teaching math. So again, they may not have a one-to-one kind of degree in math, but it might be in finance, or something.
I'm one of them. I started as a lateral entry with a degree in accounting.
Yes.
So.
And so being able to have a conversation. So knowing that in the room, you've got people who either were really good at math, who are now teaching people who may not love math and may not be good at math. So being able to understand how it feels to not love math, to not understand math, for some of our teachers is a completely foreign concept. Like they've never felt anxiety about math. So helping them connect with that. And then you have adults in the room who they themselves have anxiety about math. So a training like math anxiety not only
can speak on so many different levels.
That's right. So it not only helps the teachers who can't access that feeling of math anxiety, and it helps the teachers who they themselves have it because they don't technically have a degree in that, and
right.
And
so it's kind of like, oh, that's my one weakness, and and the minute the kid asks a question that, oh, I don't know what that is, and again, adult brain kind of takes over and like, but I'm large and in charge, but no, and really you're just masking some anxiety, and that's just math, and math is a common one that gets the anxiety. But for me, it would be social studies because even though I love it and I love history, but again, I had social studies anxiety because memorizing all these times and dates and places, which again was a part of the way I was taught, right? It's stressful to me. Whereas now I realize, oh, wait a minute, it's about understanding the concepts. And actually it helped me for teaching math because I was teaching 8th graders and they were like, why are we learning the Pythagorean theorem? I'm like, I'm with you because no one is ever going to mug you and make you recite the Pythagorean theorem and not give to keep your wallet. So it's not even about that. It's part of it's the journey. Can we solve this problem? Because if you can do this, well, then you'll be able to figure out a lot of other stuff in your life, including, well, back then the VCR. But maybe, how to make a mortgage payment. Come on. It'll all tie in together because you'll have these skills that you'll know how to problem solve. You'll know how to work a problem through. So that's what part of what I had to share with my kids.
And so with this ERPD, I ended up doing a session on the happy teacher revolution and the joy makeover. And those are copyrighted and trademarked. And so I did not train them because I am not a trainer, but I offered this session that the full intention of it, and it was just a 35-minute session. It was really just to kind of point people to these resources. It was not in any way presented as a training. But what was really nice about the one, it's based on an article by Vicki Davis, which is in like Edutopia, and it's had 12 steps to avoid teacher burnout. And so I shared the article with the teachers, and then I prefaced that whole session by telling them that more than anything, we just wanted to honor and acknowledge that this has been a rough start of the school year because of the short summer for us in our individual district, and that I wanted them to know that I saw them and that we at the district, even though I don't personally consider myself district, people consider me district because of my title. And so I wanted them to know that like, hey, I see you and Kelly sees you, like we at the district see you. We care about you. We know that what you're doing is hard and that you carry around other people's children in your heart all day. And then you go home and you've got your own people that you carry in your heart and you got to feed them and who's doing the laundry and what the heck's for supper. Right. And so we wanted you to know that we care about you as human beings first. And so here are these 12 choices you can make that kind of allow you to stand in a place of power about what you choose to let really occupy your thoughts. And then the joy piece of it was, everybody's into hacking things right now. Right. And so this joy thing was about how to hack your environment to create this biological, physiological, psychological joy response. And so I shared with them this free resource where they could get a joy makeover, these resources, a 12-day joy or 2-week joy makeover. And I thought when it finished, and, it was the media center, and I thought, oh gosh, I think they hate this. This was a, like they didn't get what they came for. It might have been too
touchy-feely.
Or that they didn't get what they came for.
Okay.
Like I was really surprised. And what happened was in the teacher feedback, and then people who came up to me after the session just said, you don't know how much we needed to hear this.
Wow.
And that was so overwhelming for me. I was in tears because I just thought, what a simple thing just for me to say, I see what you're carrying and I'm sorry that it's hard, and we see you and we appreciate you. And we're so glad you choose to carry this heavy load. And so if this helps you, wonderful. And just know that we see you. And that's really all it was. Like, here's 2 cool things. Whoop,
Right.
and it really, like, people came up afterwards and were in tears because they're exhausted and they're hurting and they're trying to give to everyone. And so I think we get into the work of professional development, but we forget about personal care. And so I think it was really just knowing we've had such an increase in, like you said, that social emotional damage for our students. And so we had all attended, it was a district-wide mandate to get the suicide prevention training. And I love our teachers and I respect them so much because immediately after it, they came to us and they said, this is great. I so appreciated this. Now, how do we help?
Right.
What do we do? And so because they're who they are and because they're amazing, they immediately felt responsible. And so it was really important to me that they not feel responsible, because your job is to be maybe a social studies teacher. So your job is to recognize the symptoms and connect them to the right people.
Right.
Like who's your right next first
professional.
step. And so whether that's the
But I think
student
that's
assistants.
the nature of being educators. And that's what I loved about the speaker that we spoke, that spoke to our group, who was Morris, and that he shared with everyone in that room, whether they were custodian, or I think somebody said, I'm just, and he took that word away, because we're all educators and
That's
empowered.
right.
And this is so exciting. And I think especially what you were just saying for our particular audience of those administrators or aspiring administrators, to remember that the people in your building, that they need to be loved on, just like the kids. You need to reaffirm what they're doing and to let them know, I see you. I see you. That's so important.
And I think I'm very guilty of this, and I don't know if other people are familiar with the true colors concept, of blue, gold, green, and orange. And I'm a green, so I tend to be very idea focused. And so I've been guilty for the years that I've done this about being very, short-term, long-term strategic planning, like what's the end game, as far as building capacity. And so I was very focused for many, many years on building teacher capacity, increasing reading scores, like those kinds of things. And what's happened for me in the last 2-3 years is really seeing that shift in our students of like authentic anxiety, and then seeing that happening with our staff as well. And it's most often it's not a diagnosed kind of thing. It's just they're feeling overwhelmed. They're feeling ineffective. They're feeling, stressed.
I think it could be one of the offshoots of this age we're living in, this information age, this being able to, the 24-hour news cycle, the instant reaction of social media, the wanting the response, the putting this out. It's a lot.
It is.
And it can weigh on people.
And I don't remember where I read this, but very recently, it probably came up in my Google feed as we talk about the ills of technology, but in my customized Google feed, that in our most connected time in history, we also have the highest rates of self-reported loneliness. And so I think that was in the back of my mind when I, just for the little session that I did on joy and on being happy, was just to I wanted the people in the room to realize, like, you all feel this way and you're not alone. And this is super normal. And we see you. And here's some things that may help remind you that it's okay. And then that was also the thinking in the content coaches asking, and it's ironic. And so I think the other lesson might be really branch out as far as who you think to ask to be part of who provides content for your staff or for your district, because the person who trained the yoga for students and yoga for teachers, she's actually, depending on where you work and what they're called, she is an administrative assistant. In the old days, they were called secretaries.
Right.
You know, so the person who taught that is actually a certified yoga instructor in a couple different types of yoga.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And so we have this highly skilled instructor right here with us. And so it was free. She felt valued and seen, because
Wow.
they're often sort of, dismissible by some people in the organization because they're, like you said, just which is not an okay way.
Right. To describe ourselves. We're all educators.
Exactly. And so she did a tremendous job. And so what I would recommend is, we connected with the people in our alternative school setting who provide counseling to be able to help teachers connect to what does the misbehavior of anxiety look like in the classroom? What does the misbehavior of ADHD look like in the classroom? Among many other things, So you've got these really highly skilled professionals throughout your district. They may be a bus driver. They may be an office assistant. They may be a clinical psychologist who works in your alternative school. But and then all those people have family members and neighbors. So a lot of times if you just kind of put the word out that you are interested in something, you will get people who are willing to come. And then I've just found you sit down with that person, someone does, and I don't do this with every group because I try to make sure that our content coaches know kind of, here's the bumpers, here's the parameters. This is the function we're trying to accomplish, and I'm not committed to any particular form. But we need to make sure people understand these things. And so I went with the content coach to work with the folks at our day treatment that provided that ODD, ADHD, anxiety, depression training. And I had spoken with our executive director. And she said, I just want to make sure that they make sure teachers understand that if you tell a family that you believe their child is depressed, we're now, responsible for paying for it. So it's really important that they get the message about how to articulate things and to whom. So when you're thinking about professional development, professional learning, I think you also need to, there's all these things. So you cast your net wide. You don't underestimate the skill and the ability of people who may be hidden among you to be experts in something. And then you make sure on the district side that you're capturing the district, what they're worried the negative fallout might be from this training, so that no one's worried when they hear that you're having this training.
Right.
They know that this has been communicated to the experts. And so I think.
And again, it's just understanding the boundaries and legally.
Yes.
What you can and what you can't. And that's not just in education. That's in any field. That's in any career.
Right.
But just being mindful of that, especially when you're kind of casting that wide net for a professional development to bring in things that kind of think a little bit outside the box or outside the typical lines of, again, everybody thinks of professional development or even school and teaching the way it was done for them, as opposed to maybe the way that's needed for, again, that time we have now, this digital age.
Yes. And I think, we're so lucky because we at secondary have these 13 amazing, just top-notch content coaches. And the executive director and I, we can sit down with them and we can say, this is the vision, and pretty much they'll ask some clarifying questions. We'll provide some guidance, and they just go make magic happen. And so if you're in a district where you can do that, that's wonderful. If you're not in a district that has that position, and if you're just trying to do this in your school, what I would say is that we, there are building leaders who do things well, and they may not be in a content area that you need it in, but maybe they have great classroom management, or they have great relationships, appropriate relationships with students. And so empower that teacher to, be able to articulate or translate to their peers how they accomplish that, what it looks like in the classroom. Because if you don't have content coaches, you've still got highly skilled teachers and other staff, guidance counselors, secretaries, custodians. You have people in the building.
And again, it's that idea of casting that wide net, because like, again, we have content coaches, and it was a coach that came to me, and again, I was a math teacher. I was helping in a session with language arts and science teachers to talk about podcasting in the classroom. Why? Well, when I was in the classroom, we didn't even have podcasts. I think we might have had 8 tracks. I don't know. I'm going to say, but because
we had cassettes.
Cassettes. Okay.
Don't sell ourselves short. No. We're not that old.
But still, because that's something that I have been doing, as a hobby, as an interest, then that was something I was able to share with those teachers. It was exciting to hear about what some of the other teachers are doing. And again, you were talking about PLCs earlier. I also talked about Twitter and my PLN, which is my professional learning network, because that's a source of PD that I get something from every week, just tuning into Twitter chats, getting different things to share.
Yes. Well,
the one thing I am so glad is that you came in to share. I know my podcast, usually we only go for about 30 minutes unless I have a really great guest and we get to talking. And I knew that was going to happen here, which is so exciting. So Shara, thank you so much for taking a few minutes in your day to be a part of the year of APing Dangerously. I really appreciate it. I don't want to cut you short. So if there was something you wanted to say, I don't.
I just want to give credit to, throughout the 10 years that I've been able to be a part of this, none of this happens because of one individual. It happens because of teams of people who are willing to put ego aside and work together and come to consensus on behalf of helping teachers help kids. And so I'm honored to be a voice for it today, but by no means do I see myself as the reason any of this happened. I feel like I'm a good connector of dots, and I'm just thankful to have had the quality of people to work with that I have. So.
Well, we are thankful to have you here. And can we follow you on Twitter? Or
Sure, absolutely.
So give us your handle.
So it's at... So it's like Smartin, because my last name's Martin, but it's also Smart ISS.
I like
so it's a little play on words. So it's at SMARTINISS.
At Smartin. So we will be following you, because you post some really cool stuff that's going on in our district, as well as quotes, because I follow you. And you can follow us here on this podcast at Year of D, because that's what Twitter did when I put the whole title of the podcast in the search. So you can follow us at Year of D. You can also find us on the web at our website, www.YearofAPingDangerously.com. As always, I thank you for being here with me. I thank those of you who are listening for being a part of the year of APing Dangerously.
Thank you for listening. For show notes and more, visit YearofAPingDangerously.com.
The year of APing Dangerously. The year of APing Dangerously.